Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Mailbox for the 6th of January 2012. My name is Totalbiscuit, bringing you your daily dose of community interaction, gaming discussion, and all that good stuff. You can email in mailbox@cynicalbrit.com, that's mailbox@cynicalbrit.com, with topics for future shows. Alright, first email comes in right here from Roffle1CP that says this: The other day, my friend and I were talking about Flash games. He came to the conclusion that all Flash games should be free. I disagreed with him and said that if the game is good enough, there's nothing wrong with the developers charging for the game. He debated that if some games coded in Flash are free, then all of them should be, that most Flash games are crap. I replied by giving him the example of a brilliant game coded in Flash, Machinarium. Then he said it was a lone exception. I completely disagree with him on the subject. My question for you is, do you think any game coded in Flash should be free? Absolutely not. Does there need to be another answer? Oh, okay. Right, you want me to expound on that. Fine. Okay. Most important thing to note is the language that a game is coded in is absolutely irrelevant to its price point, as far as I'm concerned. The idea that every Flash game should be free stems from the fact that a lot of them are. Okay, there's actually kind of a lot of games in multiple languages that are free. Flash is perhaps the most prevalent, certainly, but what about if we started coding games in HTML5? Because Flash is on the way out, and that's quite simply the case. They've stopped supporting Flash for mobile devices, for instance, so for the most part, Flash is on its way out. It will eventually die off, and a lot of things are going to be switching over to other engines, and we've got browser-based stuff such as Unity. Do you think that Unity games should be free? Because that's pretty much the same principle, right? It's a web-based game, ergo it should be free. Well, no, not necessarily. There are games built in Unity that are not web-based either, and there's plenty of games built in Flash that aren't web-based. It's just a programming language. It's just a way to create a game. It doesn't really matter if it's Flash or not. If you make a game in Flash, why should that be free if I then made the same exact game in Unity or C++ or hell, even Visual Basic? Which is free, which isn't? Well, quite frankly, none of them should be. Binding of Isaac is a Flash game. Does it matter that it's a Flash game? No, it really doesn't. And hell, you could have coded an awful lot of games in Flash, potentially, and had them executed pretty well. It just comes down to what the programmers are actually comfortable with. So no, I don't actually believe that at all. I think that there is a nasty idea and culture backing this up that actually causes this attitude to come about. The fact that Flash games have been treated very much as the way to pass a little bit of time, and just like, hey, I'm just going to go play some Flash games, and I don't really care, and hey, we're going to play some stuff on Newgrounds, and okay, that's fine. If you want to do that, then by all means. There's nothing really stopping you doing that, but that doesn't mean that you get to condemn every single game that is ever made in Flash to the realms of this should be free, and I shouldn't be having to pay anything for this game. As far as I'm concerned, whether or not you pay for the game should be coming down to the value that you perceive from that game. And the first thing you should be talking about is this game any good? I would say that most people don't even know, or at least didn't know before I either told them or they discovered it for themselves, that Binding of Isaac is a Flash game. There isn't really a huge amount more to say on the matter. I just think the very idea of condemning a game because of its programming language is ridiculous. Yes, Flash has its limitations, but is the game that you are playing worth the price? And does the engine potentially hold it back somewhat? Does the engine somehow make it less worthwhile? There are some cases where this would definitely apply. I mean, for instance, coding an FPS in Flash probably wouldn't work amazingly well. There are FPS available in Flash, but you can code an FPS better in a different programming language. So if you then try and release an FPS in Flash, people are probably going to turn around and say, well, this isn't actually all that great, and it probably should be a free game. But the quality of free games has a massive variance, as no doubt all of you have experienced at some point. There are games which could be sold commercially. I think that Stealth Bastard is an example there. That game could very easily be sold as a indie title, maybe charge $5 for it or whatever. I don't see the problem with that. I think it would work. And then there are other games which, quite frankly, should not be sold and should blatantly be free because they've got no content in them whatsoever. But it's not the engine that determines that. It always comes down to whether or not the developer thinks that they can actually sell it. And once again, it is a buyer's market in that respect. If people think it's worth buying, then they will buy it. If they don't, then they will not. And that will determine who decides to develop commercial Flash games in the future. However, there are examples of success there, as you can clearly see. Machinarium and Binding of Isaac are perhaps the two most prominent examples, but they are not the only ones. This one comes in from Chrono Blue. It's short and to the point and says, my questions are simple ones. As the end of 2011 got dominated by two S's, SWOTOR, I don't even know. Is that how you say it? Whatever. Star Wars The Old Republic and Skyrim From the 2Bs, BioWare and Bethesda, which releases do you think will make an impact in 2012? Which games are you most looking forward to in the coming year? Well, I'm definitely looking forward to Dishonored. That's something to keep an eye on. It's by Arcane Studios. Those are the guys who actually made Dark Messiah of Might and Magic, which, if that's anything to go by, then we'll have some rather interesting solutions to enemy-based problems, since Dark Messiah had plenty of that. Some other examples, of course, the fact that they describe the game as kind of a simulation where entities exist within the world and will interact with each other. So the example they give was that there was like an innocent being harassed by a pack of thugs, but the thugs actually existed in the world before that event. It wasn't a event that just spontaneously happened and the thugs spawned to make it happen. Those thugs were there in the world and they encountered that innocent and ran into it. Also the fact that one of the designers is Harvey Smith, who worked on Deus Ex. That certainly helps. Kind of an open-worldy game in a steampunk kind of setting, as far as I can tell, with some weird magical elements. The emphasis of combat seems to be using the traps in the environment in order to take people down. Admittedly, you do have weapons, but as far as I can tell, there's an awful lot of environmental interaction, which I certainly do enjoy. And you can go through the entire game without killing anybody, which is an interesting thing to have happen and is fairly rare. So that's something I'd like to have a look at. I think that one of the most influential games is probably going to be Guild Wars 2, because I have a feeling that's going to kick the MMO scene in the arse and redefine what exactly is acceptable in an MMO game and what is not. I think that this is one of the generation of MMO games that are coming out that are starting to cast aside some of the old systems in favor of new ones. The idea of throwing away the Holy Trinity, the idea of switching weapons all the time in order to get various different attacks. It's a good game, as far as I can tell. I've played quite a bit of it at shows and I've enjoyed it up until this point, so here's hoping that once we're able to talk about the beta, because right now it's incredibly closed off to the point where basically no one's in it and you can't talk about it at all. Once people are allowed to talk about the beta and actually show footage, I think we're going to see a very, very promising game coming out of ArenaNet there. A couple of other things I'm looking forward to, I would say PlanetSide 2, certainly. It's about time we had another MMO FPS. It's such a shame that we've seen so many MMOs that are simply not skill-based. PlanetSide, for those of you who don't know, is a massively multiplayer online FPS. It was something that I spent a lot of time on many years ago. We had some good times. It supported over 500 players per map. There were a wide variety of vehicles you could spawn, so you had things like big tank columns rolling across the map. You had fleets of aircraft, bomber wings. The dropship mechanic was probably the best. It was clunky, like a lot of things in the game, but the idea that you could fit an entire squad plus a couple of max units and a small vehicle into the back of a Galaxy dropship and drop the entire thing on top of a base. Then you do it with 5 more, all at the same time, and you consider, well, the amount of troops I'm dropping here would actually fill up a Battlefield 3 server, and this is just one battle on one continent in the world. It's crazy what that game could actually do. It was way ahead of its time. It had plenty of problems, but I'm hoping that PlanetSide 2 is able to really live up to that. These consistent, persistent battles that don't go away simply because you log off. They're going on by the time you log back in the next day. It's really, really awesome. Defending a base, doing covert ops, all sorts of cool stuff. There's just little battles everywhere, even just defending a tower or fighting around the back entrance to a base. That was epic enough in and of itself. That's the kind of thing that other games base entire maps and modes around, as opposed to PlanetSide, where it's like, well, this is just a part of a very, very large world, and all sorts of set-piece battles end up going on as a direct result of that. But please, Sony, no BFRs. We could definitely do without that. Nobody asked for that. Ugh. Yes, Battlefield robotics. They were big mechs. They were horrendously overpowered. They basically ruined the game. So that was unfortunate. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that, certainly. What else coming out this year? Well, I would certainly like to, of course, see the end of the Mass Effect trilogy. I'm not entirely convinced that the game's going to be good yet. I'm still umming and ahhing over various aspects of it, but we'll see. We'll see how it turns out. I think Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning is going to creep up on some people. It's got a fantastic world that's being created by R.A. Salvatore. He hasn't written the script. He's actually been employed to create the universe, which I think is a much better thing to do. Like, you give a famous novelist the job of writing a script. That's a terrible idea. Give him the job of creating an entire universe, a world, and a fiction. Then you've got the basis for a really great RPG. I did get to play a very early version of it behind closed doors at Gamescom, and I enjoyed it. Oh yes, very much so. It was really polished even at that phase, and it combines basically God of War style, Devil May Cry style games with a full-on RPG system. It seems like what Fable should have been, certainly much more grown-up version of Fable, and I think that's going to surprise an awful lot, so I'm certainly looking forward to seeing that one in action. And on a console basis, Twisted Metal. Yes, car combat. Why is it that we don't have enough car combat games today? Well, Twisted Metal is on its way back, so that should certainly help us out in that regard. Once again, Shameless, not coming to PC, but it is a Sony franchise, so one can hardly blame them for that. I think that pretty much covers it, really. I don't really know what games are going to be all that influential. I mean, there's an absolute ton of sequels coming out. Things like Diablo 3, of course. You've got Heart of the Swarm is most likely coming out this year. But I don't really know what games are actually going to end up being the most influential. It's not that predictable this time around. I think people knew that Skyrim was going to be a massive deal. And people also knew that The Old Republic would have been a massive deal as well. But next year? I don't know. I mean, it could end up being the reign of Blizzard, though personally I'm actually looking forward to Torchlight 2 a little bit more than what I played at the beta of Diablo 3 didn't really inspire me, honestly. This one comes in from Sam that says, "Now, I don't tend to play multiplayer games an awful lot these days. I'm usually busy doing something else, but when I do, I play to have the fun of a computer game with added social interaction. And yet every game I play multiplayer has tumbleweed blowing across the map. True, that tumbleweed gets shot up, blown up, and stabbed a bit, but it blows along nonetheless. I remember multiplayer games being a hive of interaction with people throwing banter around, guiding their teammates, and generally just chatting, whether it be AVP2 or Freelancer. These days, it's incredibly quiet. Whether in Team Fortress 2, Left 4 Dead, or Space Marine, multiplayer gaming seems to be somewhat of a lonely experience. I'm not a chatty person, but something, well, anything would be nice to hear and see. More critically, teamwork is suffering for it. Visual cues can only go so far, and it's near impossible to organize a team without communication, leading to having a team of lone wolves. So am I plain unlucky, or is it something that seems to be more common in games? For the record, I only play PC games. I have to wonder if different communities act differently in terms of interaction. Well, they kind of do. The fact is that there is voice communication and things in the games that you've mentioned. At Left 4 Dead, there's loads of voice communication going on in that, if you're playing with the right people. I think if you're doing Left 4 Dead without voice communication, you're really not doing it right. You can't play Survivor or indeed Versus mode without proper communication. You just can't. It's a terrible experience if you do. Team Fortress 2 does have communication, but it tends to suck to the point where I just turn my voice over IP off because I don't want to hear it. This is the problem. You go into a game and there's now voice comms and, well, it gets really annoying. And it's more annoying than typing, honestly. I remember when VoiceCom first came along and it was hailed as the revolution in multiplayer games, but as time has gone on and on, I think I've realized that a lot of VoiceCom tends to lead to less teamwork and more trolling. More nonsense, more BS being spammed through a microphone, and it's harder to ignore. You have to actually go out of your way to mute that guy. It's fairly easy to ignore a chat box in the corner of the screen. It's not so easy to ignore some 10-year-old screaming at you through a headset. That's rather irritating. When it comes to PC games, less people use the in-game VoIP than actually use things like Mumble, Ventrilo, and TeamSpeak. This is good because in-game VoIP sucks more than those things. Also, if you have a TeamSpeak server or a Mumble or whatever, then you can very, very easily just talk with your friends and team up with your friends. So I think a lot of what you're experiencing, perhaps, is not everyone being lone wolves, but smaller groups within the team that are actually teamed up on Vent and Mumble and things like that, but you're just not getting to hear what they're having to say. I think, more so than anything, the PC has enough options to make sure that in-game VoIP doesn't have to be used, whereas that is not the case with the 360, and more often than not, you do get very vocal and sometimes very irritating people in there. And personally, I don't really want to hear what other people have to say unless I am deliberately playing a game whereby I have a squad and I'm playing as a team member, and I have to play as a team member. I think that you have to really do that in Battlefield 3, and hell, the game doesn't even have proper built-in voice over IP. It's got a thing built in through the battle log, which isn't anywhere near as good. I think, though, the thing that you've got to point out the most and find the most important is that games these days might claim to require teamwork and might claim to be a team-based tactical game online, but more often than not, they actually aren't. They enable lone wolves a little bit too much. There are some games that don't really work well with lone wolf play. Battlefield 3 is a good example there. It's very, very easy to die there. You really need to play as a squad. But the problem, I think, with Battlefield 3 that Battlefield 2 didn't really have as a result of having the commander is the fact that that's about as far as the team play goes. You get teammates to watch your back, and then the game tells you where to go, especially in rush modes, like attack this objective or defend this objective, or hey, the enemy's got this, and I happen to be close by, so let's go. Now, if you play as part of a team and you've got an organized squad, great. But if you don't, you're probably not going to get all that far with it. Think about the commander in Battlefield 2, which I don't necessarily think should come back, by the way, because it basically involved taking one player out of the game entirely in order to just look at a map. The thing about the commander is he had a full-on view of what was going on, and he could actually command assets accordingly to make for a more team-based experience. And more often than not, if something pops up on your screen and says, go and attack this, chances are you probably will, unless you've got some ideas of your own. So it was much easier to herd the cats, as I like to call it, in that game than it is in other modern titles. There are not a huge number of games that have, I think, the necessary facilities to make team play actually happen. I think it's mostly incentivized team play more so than anything else, like support points, support bonuses. That doesn't actually bring about teamwork. What it brings about is a lot of spamming and things like that. I mean, have a look at Battlefield 3, for instance, and see a number of soldiers in one area. Find how many health packs are in that area. Like 12. There'll be 12 health packs for 5 guys. Why? Well, because they want the points. They want the points, and hell, they give you extra points for healing your squad. So that'll encourage team play, right? It's very contrived. It really, really is. True team play, true communication, true battle planning doesn't happen in all that many games. There are some. I think that Nuclear Dawn does it pretty well for the most part. If people are actually listening to the commander, then it can become a really tactical game, but most games simply don't have the facility to have that happen. So either you're part of an organized team that is playing a game together, i.e. League of Legends, when a fixed team queues up, they're on Mumble or Vent or TeamSpeak or whatever, and they get into a game, or you are in a game where people just aren't doing that, and there is really no middle ground there, and a lot of games just simply do not facilitate team play in the appropriate fashion, and they not so much allow lone wolf play, but they make it too easy to go lone wolf, and as a result you don't get a lot of team play there, which is kind of a shame. I do think it's simply a mechanical problem, honestly, the fact that games simply do not support team play in the way that you obviously want them to. Alright folks, that's me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching the Mailbox. It's actually me done for the week as well. I'll be back on Monday with yet more Mailboxy goodness. Email in mailbox@cynicalbret.com. Just FYI, we're trying to avoid certain subjects at the moment because we've kind of done a little bit too much on them. Old Republic, not really doing much on that at the moment because we've answered too many questions on the matter. And also the idea of YouTube partnerships and things. We're not going to discuss that for a little while. We would like a larger, more interesting set of topics rather than trying to talk about the same thing over and over again. So if you do want to email in something completely different, then by all means, give it a shot. Just a reminder as well that the next King of the Web contest is currently going on, and I'm officially putting my support behind Lindsay Sterling. And it's up to you who you vote for, really. I mean, it doesn't really matter. The reason we're continuing to take part in the contest is to build up bonus votes for the Battle Royale in August of this year, whereby hopefully we'll be able to win a ton of money for charity. And you build up bonus votes by spending all your 10 votes every 5 days. Then you get 10 bonus votes, which I encourage you to keep a hold of until the Battle Royale. It's entirely up to you, but of course, your support is very much appreciated. And I will see you next time.